The European Union has not only angered many in the UK over its fisheries demands, as Canada also had trouble keeping member states out of its waters. Brexit trade talks between the UK and the EU have reached stalemate as Brussels chief negotiator Michel Barnier demands that other European nations keep their right to fish in British waters. Mr Barnier's red lines, which have been backed by the EU27, dictate that the UK cannot get a free trade agreement and access to European markets without ensuring EU access to British fishing grounds. Before the UK left the bloc on January 31, EU member states were allowed to dip into Britain's wealth of landing under the Common Fisheries Policy, angering many fishermen north of the English Channel. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has therefore made it a priority to regain independence. The UK is not the first country to fume at the EU's persistence, as Canada and the bloc were embroiled in the Turbot War, an international fishing dispute and bloodless conflict between Canada and Spain in the mid-90s. At the time, the Canadian fishing industry was struggling due to mass decline in cod levels near its waters. This dramatic decline in fish stocks meant that around 50,000 jobs had been lost in the Canadian commercial fishing industry, and many communities had been devastated by the loss of their main source of income. In a desperate attempt to revive stocks, Canada had declared a total moratorium on cod fishing and imposed strict rules, meaning that only a limited number of trawlers could go out fishing for others, but this situation was ignored by many other countries who continued to send vessels right to the edge of Canada's economic exclusion zone, using fishing gear that was illegal under Canadian law, such as small mesh nets. Eventually, a huge clash occurred when a Spanish vessel was chased by the Canadian Coast Guard trying to prevent the fishermen from Europe undoing Ottawa's preservation efforts. The crew of the ship named Este were arrested and the Spanish vessel was towed back to the Canadian city of St. John's. In the aftermath, Britain and Ireland backed Canada's actions while the EU defended Spain's right to fish in the waters. By this point the dispute had descended into name-calling, with the Spanish claiming the Canadians had behaved like pirates, while Canada accused Spain of being conservative. Even John Major, Prime Minister at the time, risked dividing the bloc by coming out with strong public support for the Canadians. The EU eventually backed down and pushed for Spain to agree to a deal that would see its vessels leave Canadian waters. The fisheries flashpoint nearly led to armed conflict, and highlighted just how important the protection of fisheries is to countries around the world. Brussels would be wise to acknowledge the ambitions of British fishermen in retaining control over their waters as tensions between Mr Johnson and Mr Barnier continue to grow.